He called me worthless before 500 wolves, stood in the sacred circle where our ancestors had pledged their eternal bonds for 1,000 years, and told them I was the mistake he almost made. His voice carried across the clearing like a blade, sharp and deliberate, designed to cut deep. They laughed. Some of them pitied me. A few looked away in embarrassment, unable to meet my eyes. But most just stared, waiting to see me break, waiting for the tears, for the hollow girl to finally shatter like glass beneath the weight of their judgment. I felt it in that moment, the precise second when humiliation should have swallowed me whole, when I should have crumbled beneath his cruelty and their collective scorn. My knees should have buckled. My vision should have blurred with tears. I should have run into the darkness and never come back. But something else happened instead. Something that had been sleeping inside me for 22 years opened its eyes. And when it did, the ceremony did not just stop. The entire clearing fell silent. Because the wolfless healer they had mocked, the broken girl they had pitied, the empty shell they had dismissed for as long as she could remember, she was none of those things. She never had been. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this truly began. Not to the ceremony, not to the humiliation, but to the healing chamber that smelled of sage and moonflower, where my hands did the only thing the Iron Pelt Pack ever valued me for. The wound in Karsten's shoulder was deep. A training accident, he said, though the jagged edges told me it was something far more vicious. Claws, not a practice blade. Someone had meant to hurt him. I did not ask. That was not my role. My role was to fix what others broke. My fingers hovered over the torn flesh, and the silver light came as it always did, flowing from somewhere deep inside me like water finding its way through stone, warm and steady. The gash began to close beneath my touch, the muscle knitting seamlessly, the skin pulling together until only a faint pink line remained where moments ago there had been blood and exposed tissue. Karsten released the breath he had been holding. He rotated his shoulders slowly, then faster, his eyes widening. How do you do that without a wolf? His voice was hushed, reverent almost. I withdrew my hands and reached for the cloth to wipe the blood from my fingers. Some gifts do not require teeth and claws. The pack healers said it would take weeks to mend properly. You did it in minutes. He shook his head, pulling his shirt back on. Thank you, Elowen. Truly. I know the pack does not always appreciate what you do. I managed a small smile, the kind I had perfected over years of practice. They appreciate it when they are bleeding. After he left, I moved through my healing chamber with the methodical precision that had kept me sane since I was old enough to understand what I was not. Dried sage bundles hung from the rafters like prayers no one had answered. Glass jars lined the shelves in neat rows, moonflower petals, silver powder, crushed nightshade berries for fever reduction. Each herb had its purpose, each remedy its place, everything organized, everything controlled, everything except the emptiness inside me. 22 years, and that void had defined every moment of my existence. The Iron Pelt Pack called me the Hollow One when they thought I could not hear. They whispered that I was cursed, broken, a healer with power but no wolf, an anomaly that did not fit into their rigid understanding of what strength looked like. I touched my chest, pressing my palm flat against the space where my wolf should have lived. There was nothing there, just silence. Just the ache of absence that never dulled, no matter how many wounds I healed, or how many herbs I cataloged, or how many nights I spent telling myself that my worth was not measured by what I lacked. I was 7 the first time children threw stones at me. I remember the sharp crack of rock against my shoulder blade, the sting, the heat of blood trickling down my back. They called me empty shell, broken thing, said I should have been left in the woods for the real wolves to take. I ran to the river and cried until my throat was raw and my eyes had nothing left to give. That was where Thalric found me. He was 17 then, not yet alpha, just a warrior with kind amber eyes and hands that were gentle despite their size. He did not try to tell me everything would be fine, did not offer empty promises. He simply sat beside me in the grass, solid and present, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. He stayed until the sobs turned to hiccups, until the hiccups turned to silence, until the pain became something bearable. Finally, he spoke. "You are not empty, Elowen. You are just waiting for the right moment to be seen." I looked at him through tear-swollen eyes. No one sees me. They only see what I am not. I see you. His voice was quiet but certain, carrying a conviction that felt like shelter. And what I see is someone strong enough to get back up every time they knock you down. That moment changed everything. Over the next 5 years, stolen meetings in moonlit forests became whispered promises. Friendship deepened into something more precious than anything I had known. He brought me flowers that only bloomed under starlight, small white blossoms that glowed faintly in the dark. I healed his wounds after battles, my hands steady even when my heart raced at his nearness, even when the scent of pine and iron on his skin made my breath catch. When his father died and he became alpha, I feared everything would change. The weight of leadership would make him see me the way the pack did. Useful, but incomplete. A tool, not a partner. Instead, he pulled me close in the darkness of his chambers, his forehead resting against mine, his breath warm on my lips. At the next claiming ceremony, before all the packs, I will make you mine. Wolf or no wolf, Elowen, I swear it on my blood. I believed him. God help me. I believed every word. The door to my chamber opened without a knock. It was always without a knock. Brenna moved through the world like a blade, sharp, direct, impossible to ignore. Battle scars marked her arms like a map of every fight she had survived, and her dark hair was pulled back in tight warrior braids. My best friend, my only true friend. You are thinking about tomorrow night. She read my face the way she read a battlefield, instantly, completely. The ceremony. I set down the jar of silver root I had been organizing for the 3rd time. Is it that obvious? You have cleaned this chamber twice already, and you are wearing your worried face. She leaned against the table, arms crossed, her expression shifting to something more careful. Elowen, I need to tell you something about Lady Selene. My stomach tightened at the name. Lady Selene Bloodcrest had arrived from the Northern Territories 3 weeks ago. Beautiful, powerful. Her wolf was as fierce as wildfire, and her bloodline traced back to the first alphas. She moved through the pack compound like a storm, and everything in her path bent or broke. What about her? I tried to keep my voice steady. Failed. She has been in closed meetings with Thalric and the elders every day since she arrived. Brenna's expression was gentle but unflinching. The pack is talking, Elowen. They say an alpha needs a strong Luna, someone who can fight beside him, bear powerful heirs. He gave me his word. And I hope he keeps it. Brenna moved closer, her hand finding my shoulder and squeezing. But prepare yourself, just in case. I have seen how he looks at her. I have heard the whispers. The elders are pushing hard for a political match. Elder Haldrick especially. I pulled away, turning toward the window where moonlight spilled across the stone floor like liquid silver. 5 years, Brenna. 5 years of promises, of building something real. He would not do this. He is alpha now. And alphas make choices for the pack, not for themselves. My hand drifted to my chest without thinking. The old reflex. The old ache. If I had a wolf, none of this would be happening. Brenna's voice turned fierce behind me. If he chooses her over you, it is not because you are lacking anything. It is because he is too weak to deserve you. After she left, I stood alone as the shadows lengthened across the floor of my healing chamber. Tomorrow night, the claiming ceremony would begin. Alphas from all the packs would gather under the full moon to claim their chosen mates, and Thalric would either honor his promise or break my heart before 500 witnesses. I pressed my palm to my chest one more time. The silence there felt louder tonight than it ever had. Please, I whispered to whatever gods might listen. Please let me be enough. The moonlight offered no answers. I went to him the next morning. I needed to hear it from his lips, needed him to look me in the eyes and tell me the promises still held. The guards let me pass without question. I had walked this path hundreds of times. His study door was open. I found him surrounded by maps and documents, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he studied territorial boundaries. He looked tired, stressed, the weight of leadership carved into the lines of his young face. Thalric. He glanced up, and for one heartbeat, something flickered in his amber eyes. Something warm and raw and real. But it vanished quickly, replaced by a polite distance that made my blood run cold. Elawan, I did not expect you. We need to talk about tonight. His jaw tightened. Everything is prepared. The ceremony will proceed as planned. That is not what I mean. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. You have barely spoken to me in weeks. Since Solène arrived, you have been avoiding me. I see it. Everyone sees it. I have been busy. He cut me off, his voice shifting into the formal tone he used with council members. The responsibility of negotiating alliances, managing pack politics, ensuring our future strength. I am not talking about pack business. I am talking about us. Finally, he looked at me, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my breath catch. Conflict, regret, and beneath both, a resolution that had already formed, already hardened, already decided. He moved closer, reaching out to touch my face with the gentleness I remembered. For one desperate moment, hope flared in my chest like a match struck in darkness. Elawan, you know I care for you. You have been important to me these past 5 years. The past tense hit me like a physical blow. Are you still going to claim me tonight? The question came out steadier than I felt, steadier than I had any right to be. The silence stretched too long. His hand dropped from my face. The elders have raised concerns. His voice shifted again, becoming the voice of an alpha rather than the boy who had sat beside a river and promised a broken girl he saw her. The pack needs strength moving forward. An alpha's mate must be what? I forced the words through the tightness in my throat. Say it, Thalric. Say it to my face. He looked away, whole. The word hung between us like a blade suspended in air. I am whole. You know what I mean. He still would not meet my eyes, a Luna without a wolf. The other packs would see us as weak. They would question our bloodline. It would undermine everything we have built. You promised me. My voice cracked despite every effort to stay composed. 5 years ago, you swore it did not matter. I know. The regret in his voice was clear. But regret without action is just cowardice wearing a softer mask. I know what I said. But I was not alpha then. I did not understand the full weight of what this title demands. I need you to understand. This is not about what I want. Then, what is it about? Duty, survival. The pack comes first. It always has to come first. I stared at him, at this man I had loved for 5 years, and I saw a stranger, or maybe I was finally seeing clearly for the first time. The boy by the river was gone. In his place stood a coward wrapped in the language of responsibility. You are going to choose her. It was not a question. He did not deny it. I turned and walked out before he could see the tears begin to fall. Behind me, I heard him call my name once. I did not stop. I could not stop. If I stayed another moment, I would shatter completely, and I refused to give him the satisfaction of watching it happen. The sun set in shades of blood and gold. In my quarters, I stared at the traditional white dress laid out on my bed. Simple, flowing, symbolizing potential and new beginnings. Every unclaimed female would wear white tonight. Every unclaimed female except Selene, who would wear crimson. A statement of confidence, of conquest already assured. Brenna helped me dress in silence. Her hands were gentle as she braided my dark hair, weaving in small moonflowers that smelled of hope and heartbreak. When she finished, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a girl playing pretend. A girl about to walk into a ceremony where her heart would be broken before 500 witnesses. You do not have to go. Brenna's voice was quiet behind me. You do not have to stand there and watch. I have to. My voice was hollow, even to my own ears. If he is going to break his word, he will do it while looking at me. I will not run. I will not hide. Whatever happens, I will face it standing. That is my girl. She squeezed my shoulders. Head high, Elowin. You are worth more than his cowardice deserves. The ceremonial grounds swallowed me whole. Ancient oaks formed a natural cathedral overhead, their branches reaching toward each other like the hands of old gods. The full moon hung enormous and luminous in the sky, painting everything in silver. 500 wolves from neighboring packs filled the sacred clearing. Banners from the Night-Forged pack, the Frost Brand pack, the Storm Rend pack, the Grimrow pack. Representatives from families across all the territories gathered to witness bonds being forged and futures being sealed. I took my place among the unclaimed females, feeling painfully exposed in my white dress. Around me stood women with wolves, barely contained beneath their skin, confidence in their eyes, certainty that they would be chosen, claimed, valued. I was the only one who seemed fragile in comparison, the only one whose wolf was nothing but absence. Across the clearing, I saw Selene. Crimson silk clung to her like liquid fire. She stood apart from the others, already separate, already claimed in all but formal declaration. When she caught my eye, she smiled. Slow, satisfied, vicious. The alphas entered in formal procession, ceremonial black, each one powerful and commanding. The air grew thick with their combined presence. Elder Haldrick, ceremony master, stepped into the sacred circle. His white robes seemed to glow in the moonlight. Under the full moon, In the sacred clearing blessed by our ancestors, we gather to witness the claiming of mates. The bonds formed here tonight are eternal, blessed by the moon herself, unbreakable by mortal means. Let the ceremony begin. Alphas, when called, step forward and speak the name of your chosen mate clearly, that all may witness and honor the bond. My heart was thunder in my chest. Each beat counted down to my destruction. Alpha after alpha stepped forward, claimed their mates. Golden light flared as bonds took hold. Joyful couples embraced while the crowd celebrated, and I stood frozen, waiting. Each ceremony brought the moment closer. Each one felt like a countdown to my doom. Then Elder Haldrick's voice rang out. Alpha Thalric, Iron Pelt, step forward. Time stopped. Everything narrowed to this single moment. To Thalric walking into the sacred circle, moonlight illuminating his strong features. He looked like everything an alpha should be. Powerful, commanding, worthy. For one desperate heartbeat, his eyes found mine across the clearing. I saw it all in that glance. Regret, sorrow, and a decision already carved in stone. I knew with absolute certainty what was coming. Knew that all the promises had become lies when weighed against political advantage. Knew that I was about to lose everything. Alpha Thalric, speak your claim. The silence was deafening. 500 wolves held their breath. Thalric turned away from me, turned toward Selene in her crimson dress, triumph already blazing in her violet eyes. I claim Lady Selene Bloodcrest of the Northern Territories as my mate. The world tilted sideways. Sound became muffled as if I were drowning. The physical pain in my chest was real and sharp, as if something vital had been torn out by the roots. But this was not the worst part. The worst was yet to come. Thalric raised his voice, addressing the assembled packs. His eyes found mine and held them with deliberate cruelty. There is something that must be addressed before this bond is complete. There was one among you who hoped for my claim, who believed in promises made in a different time, under different circumstances. Every eye turned to me. 500 witnesses. Let it be known before all gathered packs. I nearly made a grave mistake. A terrible error that would have weakened our bloodline and shamed our legacy. A Luna must be whole. She must be powerful. She must stand as equal beside her alpha, bringing strength to the union. His amber eyes burned into mine. A wolfless healer, no matter how skilled her hands, cannot fulfill that role. She cannot lead warriors, cannot bear children strong enough to continue our line, cannot be what a Luna must be. Laughter erupted from the crowd. Cruel, mocking sounds that drove into me like claws. The hollow one thought she could be Luna. Imagine a Luna who cannot even shift. She is nothing but a useful tool. Should have stayed in her healing chamber where she belongs. Thalric was not finished. It would have weakened our bloodline. It would have made us a laughingstock among the packs. An alpha's duty is to his pack's strength above all else. Not to sentimentality, not to pity, not to misguided promises made before understanding the weight of true leadership. I stood frozen, each word stripped away another piece of my dignity. Tears streamed down my face despite every effort to stop them. My body trembled. I wanted to run, to disappear, to cease existing rather than endure another second. Selene glided past me toward the circle, leaning close enough that only I could hear her whisper, "Did you truly believe he would choose a broken thing like you?" Brenna was pushing through the crowd toward me, fury blazing on her scarred face. But beneath the humiliation, beneath the crushing weight of 500 stares, something stirred deep inside me. In the place where the hollow space had lived for 22 years, something moved. Heat flooded through my veins like liquid fire. My bones began to ache with sudden, overwhelming pressure. My skin burned as if lit from within. The world sharpened around me. Sounds crystallized. Every whisper, every heartbeat, every breath of 500 wolves became impossibly clear. Something ancient was waking up, and it was furious. The pain hit me like lightning splitting an ancient oak from crown to root. Every bone in my body felt like it was breaking and reforming simultaneously. Heat spread through my veins, burning away everything except pure primal power. I gasped, doubling over as the transformation began. But this was nothing like the gentle shifts I had watched others experience my entire life. This was not graceful. This was not natural. This was violent and ancient and absolutely unstoppable. Wolves nearest me stumbled backward, confusion turning to alarm on their faces. Something is wrong with her. Is she sick? Is she having some kind of attack? No, not sick, not broken. Awakening. The hollow space inside me that had defined my entire existence was not empty. It had never been empty. Something had been sleeping there, curled in the darkness, growing stronger with every year of silence, every stone thrown, every whispered insult. Every night I pressed my palm to my chest and begged the gods to make me whole. 22 years of dormancy. 22 years of gathering power in the shadows of my own body. And now, triggered by humiliation and heartbreak and a rage so pure it burned white hot behind my eyes, it rose. I threw my head back and screamed, but the sound that tore from my throat was not human. It was a howl, primal and devastating. It shook the ground beneath 500 pairs of feet and rattled the ancient oaks until leaves rained down like green snow. The sound spoke of moonlight and starfire and magic so old the modern packs had forgotten it ever existed. The transformation ripped through me, bones reshaping with cracks like thunder, muscles reforming, burning, stretching beyond anything a human frame should contain. My skin rippled as fur erupted across my body. Silver white fur that caught the moonlight and held it, glowing from within as if I had swallowed a star. Light exploded from me so bright that 500 wolves shielded their eyes. Night became day. The sacred clearing blazed with radiance. The pain was excruciating. The ecstasy was overwhelming. They intertwined until I could not tell one from the other, until agony and liberation became the same sensation, until every cell in my body screamed and sang in unison. And then it was done. Where Eloin the Hollow Healer had stood moments before, a wolf now commanded the sacred circle. I was massive, larger than any female wolf in living memory, larger than most males. My fur was like moonlight on fresh snow, luminous, ethereal, seeming to pulse with an inner radiance that had no source and no end. My eyes burned with ancient gold fire that cast shadows where no shadows should have been. Power radiated from me in waves that made the air shimmer and buckle. Absolute silence fell across the ceremonial grounds. 500 wolves stared with mouths hanging open, eyes wide. Some had dropped to their knees without meaning to, driven down by instinct rather than choice. The laughter had died so completely it was as if it had never existed. The mockery had evaporated like morning frost beneath a merciless sun. I stood on 4 legs for the first time in my life, and the world was completely different. Every sense had been heightened beyond imagination. I could smell individual emotions as distinctly as I could smell the sage bundles in my healing chamber. Solenne's disbelief was sharp and acrid, tinged with something darker. Fear. She reeked of it. Thalric's horror and regret poured off him in waves that smelled of burnt copper and ash. And Brenna. My dear Brenna. Fierce joy mixed with tears. Pride so bright it almost had a color. I could hear hearts beating. Blood rushing. The whisper of wind through oak leaves 300 yards away. I could feel the earth beneath my paws, alive and ancient and singing with power that resonated with whatever had awakened inside me. My wolf consciousness merged with my human mind. Not two separate beings fighting for control, but one, whole, complete, unified in a way I had never experienced in 22 years of fractured existence. For 22 years, they had called me hollow. They had been wrong. I had never been empty. I had been waiting. My luminous wolf surveyed the crowd with predatory awareness. I saw everything with crystalline clarity. The shock, the fear, the sudden, dawning realization spreading across face after face that they had deeply, profoundly, catastrophically misjudged what I was. The warriors who had snickered behind my back now trembled. The elders who had lobbied for my dismissal from the pack could not meet my golden eyes. The children of those who had once thrown stones at a 7-year-old girl pressed themselves against their parents in terrified silence. I looked at Thalric. My wolf studied him with cool detachment, the way one might study an insect on a window pane. The man who had broken my heart seemed small now, insignificant. A coward who had thrown away something precious because he lacked the courage to recognize its value. My wolf felt nothing for him. Not love, not hate, not even contempt. Just the vast, cold emptiness of indifference. I looked at Solenne, watched her triumph drain to disbelief, and then to something that looked very much like terror. Her violet eyes were wide, her crimson dress suddenly garish against the silver light pouring from my body. She took a step backward without seeming to realize she had moved. Good. Let her see what she tried to destroy. Then I felt it. Another presence. Powerful beyond measure. Ancient beyond counting. It pressed against my newly awakened senses like the gravity of a planet, enormous and inescapable. Every instinct in my wolf recognized strength far greater than my own. My wolf did not register him as a threat. She registered him as something far more dangerous, something that made the blood in my veins sing a frequency I had never heard, but somehow already knew. At the edge of the clearing, a figure stepped from the shadows between the ancient oaks. The air itself seemed to change, to thicken, to grow heavier with authority so absolute that breathing became a conscious effort. Every wolf in the assembly felt it simultaneously. The crushing weight of power that made alphas seem like pups. Alpha King Valdris Wolfspire had arrived. He was legend made flesh, the most powerful wolf in all the territories, ruler of the 10 packs. His authority superseded every alpha present the way a river supersedes the stones in its path. I had heard stories of him my entire life, whispered around fires like ghost stories, spoken of with the kind of reverence usually reserved for gods and natural disasters. But I had never seen him. He was tall and powerfully built, moving with lethal grace that spoke not of years, but of centuries of battles fought and survived. Silver streaked through his long black hair like frost on midnight, marking age and wisdom that went beyond anything mortal. His face was sharp-featured and strong-jawed, neither young nor old, but something timeless, something carved from stone and starlight. Eyes like winter storms surveyed the scene with calm authority, pale gray with steel beneath. Those eyes missed nothing. He wore midnight blue with silver embroidery, formal but clearly designed for a body that had seen more battlefields than banquet halls. Every step he took radiated power that made my newly awakened wolf want to lower her head in submission. But I did not. I held his gaze as he walked forward. Each measured step brought him closer. The crowd parted before him like water before the prow of a warship. No one dared stand in his path. Elder Haldrick immediately dropped to one knee, his ceremonial robes pooling around him. Alpha King. We were not expecting your presence at this. Valdris barely glanced at him. His pale gaze was locked on my wolf form, and I saw something in them I could not quite name. Not threat, not fear, not curiosity, exactly. Recognition. As if he were looking at something he had been searching for across a very long time. He stopped at the edge of the sacred circle, 10 feet from where I stood, close enough that I could smell him. Pine forests and winter storms, cold mountain air and something deeper, something that smelled like the earth after lightning strikes. Ancient, elemental. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but it carried absolute authority to every corner of the clearing, to every ear, as if the wind itself chose to amplify his words. Kneel. The command was not directed at me. It was directed at everyone else. The weight of it crashed down like an avalanche. Every wolf in the ceremonial grounds dropped. Alphas, warriors, elders, healers. All pressed to the ground in submission. They could not resist, even if they wanted to. Thalric went to his knees, head bowed, his face white with shock. Solène was forced down, her crimson dress pooling around her in the dirt like spilled blood. Even Elder Haldrick prostrated himself fully. 500 wolves bowing before their king. Only 2 remained standing. Valdris and me. Gasps rippled through those who dared to look up. No one refused the Alpha King's command. No one in living memory had remained standing when Valdris Wolfspire spoke that word. But I was newly born into power I did not yet understand, and my wolf recognized him not as a master to submit to, but as something else entirely, something that called to the ancient blood flowing through my veins. Something that resonated at a frequency I felt in my bones and my teeth and the very marrow of my being. Valdris's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. It was closer to approval, satisfaction, the expression of a man who has searched the horizon for 100 years and finally seen what he was looking for. Not broken, he said. His voice carried to every wolf present. Never broken. He took another step closer, and my wolf did not retreat, did not lower her head, did not flinch, just sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake. Those ancient eyes blazed with an intensity that should have been terrifying, but instead felt like warmth, like recognition, like the first light of morning after the longest night of your life. Do you know what you are, little wolf? I could not speak in this form, could only hold his gaze as power crackled between us like static before a thunderstorm. The air shimmered where our auras met, silver white and midnight blue, dancing against each other in patterns that looked almost deliberate. Almost like language. Valdris turned to face the assembly, and his voice rang with the authority of a king delivering a verdict. This wolf carries STARBORN blood. Shocked murmurs erupted across the clearing. Younger wolves looked confused, exchanging glances. But the elders, The elders' faces filled with something I had never seen directed at anything connected to me. Awe. Pure, trembling, disbelieving awe. The ancient lineage of the first shifters, Valdris continued, born directly from the moon's blessing, extinct for 5 centuries. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the crowd like a burial shroud over everything they had ever believed about me. Or so we believed. He looked back at me, and something shifted in his expression. Something almost like wonder broke through the granite composure of a king who had ruled for longer than most bloodlines had existed. STARBORN wolves were the original shifters. They could heal with a touch. Could shift at will, not bound by the moon's cycles. Their power exceeded anything the modern packs possess. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping to something intimate, something meant for my ears though others caught fragments. STARBORN do not wake by accident, little wolf. The last time one awakened was before a great war. Remember that. The words settled into me like seeds in dark soil. I did not understand them yet, but my wolf memorized every syllable. Valdris straightened and his gaze found Thalric, still kneeling in the dirt. The temperature in the clearing seemed to drop 10 degrees. And you. The scorn in Valdris's voice could have cut through steel and stone alike. You threw her away for political convenience. Thalric could not meet his eyes. His entire body trembled under the weight of the king's contempt. You stood in the sacred circle and called her worthless. You humiliated her before 500 witnesses. You took promises made in love and broke them for advantage. Each word landed like a physical blow, and I watched Thalric flinch with each one. You nearly destroyed something priceless because you were too blind to see its value. Valdris's power pressed down on Thalric, making the younger alpha's shoulders bow further toward the ground. She is not weak. She is not cursed. She is not a mistake. She is legend made flesh. And you will live the rest of your days knowing you had treasure in your hands and threw it into the mud. Then Valdris turned back to me, and his expression changed completely. The harsh authority melted away like ice in spring. What replaced it was something gentler than I would have imagined possible from a wolf of such terrifying power. Something almost tender. Shift back, he said softly. Let them see you fully. It was a command, but not forceful, more like an invitation. A request between equals, not an order from a king to a subject. My wolf hesitated. This form was new, powerful, everything I had dreamed of for 22 years. Returning to human felt like losing something precious I had only just found. But I felt the pull of his words, felt something deeper calling between us, ancient to ancient, STARBORN to whatever Valdris was. Something that predated language and logic and the rational mind. I let my wolf recede. The transformation reversed in flowing silver light, and when it finished, I stood human again in the sacred circle. Naked, glowing with residual power, moonlight seemed to cling to my skin as if reluctant to let go. I should have felt exposed, vulnerable, ashamed. 500 wolves staring at my bare skin, at the body they had dismissed and mocked for 22 years. Instead, I felt powerful. The silver light still pulsed faintly beneath my skin, and the emptiness in my chest was gone, replaced by warmth, by presence, by the steady, ancient heartbeat of my wolf, finally awake, finally home. Valdris removed his formal cloak in one smooth motion and approached slowly. He draped it around my shoulders with careful respect, the midnight blue fabric warm from his body and smelling of pine and storms and centuries of solitude. His fingers adjusted the fabric at my collarbone, close to my skin, but never touching it without permission. The restraint in that gesture said more than any declaration could have. Our eyes met at close range, and the connection between us was electric. His wolf recognized mine. Mine recognized his. Not with the shy curiosity of strangers meeting, but with the shocked relief of two beings who had been searching for each other across an impossible distance and had finally collided. Then, before 500 stunned witnesses, the Alpha King knelt. Not the command that had forced everyone else down. Not submission. A choice. His choice. Made freely before every wolf who would ever hear this story retold. He extended his hand upward toward me, palm open, offering rather than taking. I am Valdris Wolfspire, Alpha King of the 10 Packs, first among wolves. His voice carried formal weight, ritual cadence, but beneath it I heard something raw, something vulnerable that I suspected no living soul had heard from this man in centuries. Before these witnesses, beneath the full moon, in the sacred circle, I claim you as my mate. He paused, storm gray eyes holding mine with an intensity that stole the air from my lungs. If you will have me. The world held its breath. 500 wolves, ancient oaks. The moon herself seemed to lean closer. An hour ago, I had been hollow, broken, rejected before 500 witnesses, called worthless by the man I had loved for 5 years. Now the most powerful wolf in all the territories knelt at my feet, his scarred hand extended, asking for my acceptance. This was unprecedented. The Alpha King had not taken a mate in over a century. He never asked permission. His word was law across all territories. Yet here he knelt, offering choice to a woman the pack had mocked mere minutes ago. You do not have to accept. His voice dropped low. Meant only for me. I will not force this. I will not trap you. But when your wolf woke, I felt it. The recognition. Did you not? I had. The moment my wolf opened her eyes and saw him, something had clicked into place with the finality of a lock finding its key. Ancient calling to ancient. Two pieces of a whole finding each other across centuries of separation. But I had been here before, standing in front of a man who made promises, believing words spoken with conviction, trusting someone with the most vulnerable parts of myself, only to have them handed back to me in pieces. I looked past Valdris's shoulder and saw Thalric still kneeling, his face destroyed by regret. Saw Solène, her triumph turned to ashes, her violet eyes wide with something that looked like the beginning of understanding that she had won nothing of real value. Saw the crowd who had laughed at my pain now watching in stunned, humbled silence. Then I looked back at the man before me, this king who had defended me before he owed me anything, who had revealed my true nature without asking for payment, who knelt when he could have commanded, but trust was a wound that had not yet healed. Why should I believe you? The question left my lips before I could stop it, raw and honest and stripped of any pretense. Every wolf in the clearing heard it. Heard a woman who had been broken by promises ask the most powerful wolf alive to justify his words. The audacity of it made several elders gasp. Valdris did not flinch, did not bristle at being questioned before his subjects. Instead, something in his expression softened further. Almost imperceptibly, the corner of his mouth moved. "You should not," he said. His voice was steady and without offense. "Not yet. Let me prove it." Those 5 words dismantled the last of my resistance. Not because they were a grand declaration, not because they were poetic or romantic or wrapped in ceremony, but because they were honest, because they did not demand trust. They asked to earn it. My hand trembled as I reached out. When my fingers touched his palm, the bond snapped into place like a lightning strike. Overwhelming, all-consuming. I felt him. His strength, vast and ancient, like standing at the base of a mountain. His loneliness, centuries of it, so deep and wide, it made my 22 years of isolation seem like a single raindrop against an ocean of solitude. His fierce protectiveness already wrapping around me like armor. And the weight, the unimaginable weight of ruling alone for longer than most civilizations endured. And he felt me. Every hurt, every moment of pain, every stone thrown by children and word thrown by adults, every night pressing my palm to an empty chest, my healing gift, my hidden strength. The love I had given Thalric freely and had returned as betrayal. The resilience that had kept me standing when everything demanded I fall. Valdris's eyes blazed gold as his wolf surged forward behind them. Power exploded from both of us. His midnight blue, mine silver white. The two auras intertwined above us in spiraling columns that reached toward the moon like prayers being answered after 1,000 years of silence. He rose to his feet, pulling me up with him, never releasing my hand. His other hand cupped my face with devastating gentleness. The contrast of it nearly undid me. Hands that had killed, hands that had waged wars, touching my face as if I were something sacred. The claim is made. He announced it to the assembly, his voice ringing with authority and something that sounded like joy. Something that sounded like a man who had forgotten what joy felt like remembering all at once. The bond is formed. Elder Haldrick stepped forward, his aged face struck with awe. Alpha King, the bond. His voice shook. It is a true mate bond, blessed by the moon goddess herself. Only 1 in 1,000 wolves find their true mate, the other half of their soul. Only the moon can forge such a bond, Haldrick continued. This is beyond mortal claiming. The goddess herself has spoken. Valdris's hand tightened on mine. She has indeed. The bond sang between us, growing stronger with every heartbeat. I could feel his emotions as clearly as my own, his satisfaction at finding me, his cold fury at how I had been treated, his determination to protect what was his, and beneath it all, something deeper. Something that felt like coming home after wandering lost through a storm that had lasted 300 years. Before we left, Valdris turned one last time toward Thalric. You claimed Lady Selene publicly. That bond is yours to complete or break, but know this. He glanced at Selene, who still knelt in the dirt, her crimson dress stained with earth. She showed you exactly who she is tonight. Someone who finds satisfaction in cruelty. Someone who values power over character. You chose each other. Now live with it. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Thalric had chosen Selene for political advantage. Now he was bound to her, trapped with a woman he did not love, having lost the one he did. And Selene was bound to an alpha who would look at her every day and see the ghost of what he had thrown away. Valdris looked down at me, and the hardness in his face dissolved. Can you shift again? I called my wolf, and she came easily now, not with the violent eruption of the first transformation, but with fluid grace, like stepping through a doorway I had not known existed until tonight. In seconds, a luminous white wolf stood where I had been. Valdris shifted beside me. His wolf was massive, larger even than mine. midnight black with silver streaking through his fur like starlight trapped in dark water. Ancient beyond measure, power radiating from every line of his form like heat from a dying star. We stood side by side, moonlight and midnight, STARBORN and king. He touched his muzzle to mine, a gesture of intimacy that sent warmth flooding through the mate bond. Gentle, questioning. I pressed back and felt his wolf exhale with something that felt like relief. Then we ran. Into the forest. Away from the ceremony. Away from the pack that had mocked me. And the man who had broken his promises. And the woman who had whispered poison in my ear. Toward something new. The last thing I saw before the trees swallowed us was Brenna, tears streaming down her scarred face, giving me a small wave and a brilliant, ferocious smile. My friend, my only friend, who had always believed I was more than they saw. Then the forest closed around us, and we were free. Running felt like flying, like finally being complete after 22 years of incompleteness. The forest blurred past as Valdris and I raced through moonlit shadows, our wolves moving in perfect synchronization as if we had run together 1,000 times before. Wind rushed through my fur. The ground was solid and real beneath my paws. Every muscle worked in harmony, powerful and sure, as if my body had always known how to do this and had simply been waiting for permission. Scents exploded around me in a symphony I had never imagined. Pine and damp earth. Night-blooming flowers opening their petals to the moon. The sharp clarity of a nearby stream. The warm musk of deer bedded down in a thicket half a mile away. Valdris ran beside me, occasionally brushing against my flank in a gesture that sent warmth pulsing through the bond. His wolf was playing, I realized, inviting chase, testing my speed with the lightness of someone who had forgotten how to play and was remembering. I surged forward, competitive instinct flaring bright and unfamiliar and wonderful. My wolf was fast, faster than I had imagined possible. The trees became a blur of bark and moonlight. I pulled ahead, glancing back to see amusement dancing in his storm-gray eyes. He caught up effortlessly, his greater size and centuries of experience giving him the advantage. But he did not pass me, just ran alongside, matching my pace perfectly. 2 wolves in moonlight. One who had waited 22 years to run. One who had waited far longer to have someone to run beside. We ran until the forest opened onto a ridge overlooking the valley below. Moonlight bathed everything in silver. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds flung by careless gods. The ceremonial grounds were far behind us now, just distant lights in the darkness. A chapter closed, a door shut. I shifted back to human form, the transformation becoming easier each time, like a language I was learning rapidly through immersion. Valdris shifted beside me, and we stood together in the moonlight, both breathing hard from the run, both glowing with residual power that had not quite settled beneath our skin. That was, I could not find words large enough for what I had just experienced, for the sensation of 4 legs and wind and earth and absolute freedom. Freedom. Valdris's voice was warm in the darkness. What you should have had from birth. I wrapped my arms around myself, the night air cool against my skin. His cloak had been lost in the shift, and I was aware of my nakedness, but strangely unashamed. My body had just done something miraculous. It felt wrong to be embarrassed by it. Valdris seemed entirely unconcerned with his own bare skin, comfortable in his body in a way that spoke of centuries of shifting, of treating the boundary between human and wolf as nothing more significant than the boundary between breathing in and breathing out. Is this real? I whispered, staring out at the valley painted in silver and shadow. Not a dream brought on by heartbreak and humiliation? It is real, Elowen, all of it. He moved to a large stone, still warm from the afternoon sun, and settled onto it, gesturing for me to sit beside him. I did. The stone was smooth beneath me, and the warmth of it felt grounding, real, present. Why did you come tonight? The question burst out, carrying all the raw honesty of a woman who had learned the hard way that beautiful moments could be built on foundations of sand. To the ceremony? I heard rumors 3 months ago. His voice was quiet, contemplative. A wolfless healer in the Iron Pelt Pack with unusual powers. Healing abilities that surpassed normal pack healers by orders of magnitude. Silver light that should not exist without a wolf to channel it. You came to investigate me. I came because something told me those rumors meant more than they seemed. His hand found mine in the darkness. His skin was warm and rough with calluses and scars. A warrior's hand. A king's hand. STARBORN bloodlines manifest differently in each generation. Sometimes as enhanced healing, sometimes as the ability to shift without the moon, sometimes as power that sleeps until the right catalyst awakens it. And you thought I might be STARBORN, I hoped. His thumb traced slow circles on my palm, and the mate bond hummed with each point of contact. The bloodline was thought extinct. But legends spoke of dormant periods, times when STARBORN wolves seemed gone from the world, only to reappear when they were needed most. I looked at our joined hands. His were scarred from battles I could not imagine, marked by time and violence and the weight of decisions that had shaped the fate of thousands. Mine were smooth, marked only by years of healing work, of pressing herbs against wounds, of coaxing broken flesh to knit itself whole. When you stood in that circle tonight, Valdris continued, his voice taking on a quality I had not heard before, something raw, something vulnerable. Before anything happened, before your wolf woke, I felt it. The pull of recognition. My wolf knew yours was there, sleeping, waiting. Knew it the way the tide knows the moon. But my wolf had not emerged yet. True mate bonds exist before wolves recognize them, before either party understands what they are to each other. His eyes found mine in the moonlight, steel and silver in the half-dark, and the intensity in them made my breath falter. I came to the ceremony planning to observe, to see if my suspicions about your bloodline were correct. Then I watched that boy reject you publicly, humiliate you before everyone. His jaw tightened. The hand holding mine gripped harder. I watched you standing there, breaking, and I felt your pain like it was my own. And I thought, this woman has endured 22 years of mockery, of being called broken and hollow and worthless. She stood alone against a pack that used her but never valued her. And still she came to that ceremony with her head high, ready to face whatever came. I thought I was going to lose everything. My voice was barely a whisper. Instead, you found what had always been inside you. His hand moved to cup my face, and the touch sent silver light flickering across my skin where his fingers made contact. Your wolf did not awaken despite the pain. Elowen. She awoke because of it. Because you had finally been pushed far enough, hurt deeply enough, that the protective barrier keeping her dormant shattered. I leaned into his touch, still trying to process the enormity of everything that had changed. An hour ago, I had nothing. Now I had a wolf. A mate bond, and the most powerful wolf in existence looking at me like I was the answer to a question he had stopped asking a very long time ago. There was a scar on his chest. I had noticed it during the shift. A jagged line running from his left collarbone to just above his heart. Old, deep. The kind of wound that should have killed whoever received it. Without thinking, I reached out and pressed my fingers to it. Silver light bloomed from my palm. The scar tissue warmed beneath my touch, and Valdris went completely still. His breath stopped. His entire body became motionless in a way that had nothing to do with calm and everything to do with shock. "What are you doing?" His voice was rough. "I do not know." It was honest. My hand had moved on instinct, guided by the same force that had always guided my healing. The light pulsed gently, sinking into the old wound, and I felt something shift beneath my fingers. Not the physical tissue, something deeper. An old pain releasing its grip by a fraction. Valdris exhaled slowly, shakily. That scar is 300 years old. No healer has ever been able to touch it, not even to ease the ache. I pulled my hand back, suddenly uncertain. "I am sorry. I should have asked. Do not apologize." His voice was strange, thick with an emotion I could not identify. For 300 years that wound has ached. Every day, every night. You touched it for 10 seconds, and for the first time in 3 centuries, it does not hurt. He stared at me with an expression I was beginning to recognize. The same look he had given me across the sacred circle. Wonder. "What happened?" I asked softly. 300 years ago? His eyes shifted to the horizon where the first suggestion of dawn was beginning to lighten the sky from black to deep blue. My first mate. My first bond. She was killed in the War of the 5 Packs. I could not save her. This scar is from the blade that took her from me. I survived the wound. I never fully survived the loss. The words were delivered simply, without drama, without self-pity, just facts, stated by a man who had carried them for 300 years and had long ago stopped expecting anyone to understand. But I understood. Not the specifics, not the centuries, but the core of it. The hollow space left behind when someone you love is taken from you. The way absence becomes a companion, the way you learn to function around the void without ever forgetting it, is there. How long were you alone? Since her. His thumb resumed its slow circles on my palm. I ruled alone, fought alone, made every decision alone. I stopped hoping decades ago. Accepted that I would live the rest of my considerable existence without a bond, without warmth, without someone who could touch an old wound and make it stop aching. He turned to face me, and the dawn light caught his features, softening the sharp angles, illuminating the silver in his hair. Storm gray eyes met mine. Then your wolf woke up across an entire territory, and mine nearly tore through my skin to reach you. The silence between us was not empty. It was full of things too large for words. 2 broken people finding each other in the wreckage of their separate agonies. A woman who had been hollow for 22 years. A king who had been hollow for 300. He leaned forward. His forehead touched mine. The mate bond sang between us, warm and steady. "I need you to know something, Elowen." He spoke against my skin, his breath warm, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will not rush you. I will not trap you. The bond exists regardless of what we choose to do with it. You can have time, space, whatever you need. Why are you being so careful with me? Because everyone else has been careless with you, and you deserve someone who handles you like you matter." The dawn broke in shades of pink and gold over the valley, and I sat beside the Alpha King on a warm stone at the edge of the world, his forehead against mine, his hand in my hand, the mate bond humming between us like a song I had waited my whole life to hear. Somewhere behind us, the Iron Pelt Pack was waking to the reality of what they had lost. Thalric was facing a future bound to a woman he did not love. Solène was learning that the crown she had stolen was made of thorns. But here, on this ridge, watching the first light of a new day spill across a kingdom I had not yet seen, I was beginning to believe that the hollow space inside me had never been a curse. It had been a cradle, waiting to hold something so much greater than I had ever dared to imagine. 3 weeks of happiness. That was all the universe allowed me before it tested me again. The kingdom had welcomed me with a mixture of awe and calculation. Valdris presented me to the court as his true mate and their queen. The council bowed. The people stared. Some whispered with reverence about the STARBORN bloodline returned from extinction. Others whispered with suspicion about a wolfless healer elevated beyond her station overnight. I did not care about whispers. I had survived 22 years of them. What I cared about was this new life unfolding before me like a flower I was terrified to touch for fear it would crumble. The palace of white stone that glowed in the sunlight. The gardens where I could grow herbs I had only read about in ancient texts. The healing rooms Valdris had built for me without being asked, stocked with everything I could need, and several things I had not known I wanted. He had paid attention to my hands when they moved over remedies, had noticed which jars I reached for most, had remembered, and Valdris himself. He courted me with the patience of a man who understood that trust, once broken, could only be rebuilt one careful gesture at a time. He did not rush, did not push. He brought me books about STARBORN history from the oldest sections of the palace library, leather-bound volumes that smelled of centuries. He walked with me through the city, introducing me to his people with quiet pride in his voice. He sat across from me at meals and listened to me talk about healing techniques with an attentiveness that made me feel seen in a way Thalric never had. At night, in the chambers we shared, the slow burn between us grew hotter by degrees. A touch that lingered 1 second longer than necessary. His hand at the small of my back as we walked through corridors. The way his eyes darkened when he watched me unbraid my hair before bed. The way my breath caught when his fingers grazed my collarbone while adjusting my cloak. We had not yet crossed the final threshold. Not because the desire was absent. It was so present it made the air between us vibrate. But because he was giving me time, and I was learning to believe that time given freely was not the same as time borrowed before betrayal. I found the book on my 11th day in the palace, deep in the library, in a section so old the shelves were carved directly into the stone walls. I pulled a volume bound in silver leather that seemed to hum beneath my fingers. A history of STARBORN wolves, written by a STARBORN hand. Most of the text was faded beyond reading, but one passage remained clear, inked in pigment that had refused to surrender to time. When the last STARBORN sleeper wakes, so too shall the old darkness stir. For light and shadow are tethered. One cannot rise without the other lifting its head from centuries of slumber. I read it 3 times. Each time, the words settled heavier against my chest. I told Valdris that evening. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing still and heavy. I have felt it, he admitted quietly. Something shifting at the edges of the territories. Scouts have reported shadows near the borders that do not behave as shadows should. We will be watchful, but do not let ancient prophecy steal your peace before any threat has shown its face. I tried to take his advice, tried to focus on the present, on healing the people who came to me daily with ailments the palace healers could not touch, on learning the rhythms of the court, on the growing warmth between Valdris and me that was becoming harder to contain within the boundaries of patience and propriety, but I could not shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting, gathering itself in the dark places where my new light could not reach. 3 weeks to the night, the celebration feast. Valdris had organized it as a formal introduction of his queen to representatives from all 10 packs. The great hall blazed with candlelight. Long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meat and dark wine and honeyed bread. Wolves from every territory filled the room. Music played. Laughter echoed off stone walls. For the first time since arriving, I felt something close to belonging. Valdris sat beside me at the high table, his hand resting on mine where it lay on the armrest of my chair. His thumb traced the familiar slow circles on my skin. The mate bond hummed with contentment. "You look beautiful tonight," he murmured, leaning close. "Candlelight suits you." I turned to respond, a warmth rising in my cheeks that had nothing to do with the wine I had barely touched. That was when I saw the servant approach the high table carrying a fresh goblet of wine for the king. A young man with downcast eyes and steady hands. Nothing remarkable, nothing alarming. He placed the goblet before Valdris with a low bow and retreated into the crowd. Valdris reached for the wine, raised it to his lips, drank. The change was not immediate. It crept in like frost spreading across glass. 5 minutes after drinking, Valdris's hand tightened on mine, not in affection, in pain. His fingers gripped with sudden, crushing force, then went slack. His face paled beneath the candlelight. Sweat broke across his forehead in a fine sheen. Ilawan. My name on his lips was wrong, strained, thin as paper tearing. Something is... He did not finish the sentence. His eyes rolled backward, and the Alpha King collapsed forward onto the high table, sending plates and goblets crashing to the stone floor. The sound of shattering glass cut through the music like a scream. I felt it through the bond before my eyes fully registered what had happened. Pain, not mine, his. Searing through the connection between us like acid poured along a wire. The mate bond that had been humming with warmth suddenly burned white hot, and I gasped as the sensation hit me. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and was slowly, methodically pulling the bond apart thread by thread. Valdris. I was on my feet before anyone else moved. My hands found his face. His skin was ice cold, where moments ago it had been warm. His breathing was shallow and ragged. His heartbeat, which I could feel through the bond as clearly as my own, was stuttering, slowing, wrong. The great hall erupted into chaos. Guards surged forward. Council members shouted. Wolves from visiting packs rose to their feet in alarm. Someone was screaming for the palace healers, but I was already there. I was the healer, and my hands were already glowing silver, pressing against his chest, searching for the source of what was destroying him from within. What I found made my blood freeze. This was not a simple poison. This was something ancient, something designed specifically to attack the mate bond itself, to corrode the connection between two bonded wolves until the thread snapped, and when a true mate bond broke, when a bond blessed by the moon goddess herself was severed by force, both wolves died. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were targeting. The palace healers arrived within minutes. 3 of them. Experienced. Competent. They examined the king with practiced efficiency, and one by one their faces went pale. "We cannot identify the compound," the eldest said, her voice tight with controlled fear. "It is unlike anything in our records. We do not know how to counter it." I looked at Valdris's face, gray now, the color of ash, the color of endings. Through the bond I could feel him fading. Not gone yet, but diminishing, like a fire being slowly, deliberately smothered. How long? My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone made of iron. The healer hesitated. "If the bond is the target and the corrosion continues at this rate, 3 days, perhaps less. If the bond breaks entirely..." She did not need to finish. 3 days. 72 hours before the bond shattered and took both of us with it. Valdris was carried to our chambers. I walked beside the guards who bore him, my hand never leaving his, my silver light pulsing steadily against his skin in a desperate attempt to slow what I could not yet stop. The bond was still there, damaged, fraying, but present. As long as it held, there was time. The court erupted around me like a hive struck with a stone. Council members argued in corridors. Guards swept the palace searching for the servant who had carried the wine. He had vanished. Suspicion turned in every direction. And in the shadows of that chaos, I heard the whispers begin. The new queen arrives, and within 3 weeks, the king falls. Perhaps she brought this upon him. Perhaps the STARBORN bloodline carries a curse along with its power. Perhaps she is not what she claims to be. I ignored them. I had been whispered about my entire life. Whispers could not touch me now. Only one thing mattered. On the second morning, the investigation turned up a name. The servant who had poisoned the wine had been hired through an intermediary connected to a minor lord on the council. Under questioning, the lord broke. The poison was not his idea. The formula had come from the Northern Territories. An ancient compound, nearly forgotten, passed through a chain of hands designed to be untraceable, but not untraceable enough. The chain led back to Solène Bloodcrest, bound to Thalric by the claiming ceremony, humiliated by the revelation of my STARBORN blood. Stripped of the triumph she had savored, she had not accepted her defeat. She had retaliated with the patience and precision of a woman who understood that the most dangerous blade is the one you never see coming. I received this information standing at Valdris's bedside. His breathing had grown shallower overnight. The mate bond flickered like a candle in a storm. I could feel it weakening, the threads fraying one by one, and each severed strand sent a jolt of pain through my chest that made me want to scream. But I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not collapse. Instead, I looked at the council members gathered in the doorway of the king's chambers. These men and women who had watched me arrive with suspicion, who had questioned my worthiness in polite language that barely concealed their contempt, who were now staring at me with uncertainty, waiting to see what the new queen would do when her king lay dying and the court was fracturing around her. I stood up straight. I let the silver light in my veins rise to the surface until it glowed visibly beneath my skin. I felt my wolf stir, massive and ancient and furious, pressing against the boundary of my human form. "I am your queen," I said. My voice carried across the chamber with an authority I did not know I possessed until the words were already in the air. "I am STARBORN, and I will save my mate. Anyone who wishes to stand in my way is welcome to try. No one moved, no one spoke, no one breathed. I turned back to Valdris, pressed my glowing hands to his chest, felt the damaged bond beneath my palms, fraying, weakening, dying by degrees. The palace healers said there was nothing they could do. The conventional methods could not reach a poison designed to attack the bond itself. But I was not conventional. I had never been conventional. I was STARBORN, the last of a bloodline that had healed wounds the modern packs could not imagine. I remembered the scar on his chest, 300 years old. No healer had ever been able to touch it. I had eased its pain in 10 seconds on a moonlit ridge. If I could reach a 300-year-old wound with my touch, I could reach a 3-day-old poison. But not from the outside, not through skin and muscle and bone. I needed to go deeper. The old STARBORN text I had found in the library spoke of a healing that went beyond the physical, a technique the ancient STARBORN used to mend bonds that had been damaged by dark magic. The healer entered the mate bond itself, traveled through it into the consciousness of their bonded partner, and fought the corruption from within. The risk was absolute. If I failed, if the bond broke while I was inside it, we both died, not separately, together, tangled in the wreckage of a connection that was never meant to be severed. I prepared through the second night, read every fragment of the STARBORN text I could decipher, memorized the pathways described in faded ink, practiced channeling my silver light into the bond rather than through my hands. On the dawn of the third day, with less than 24 hours remaining before the bond collapsed entirely, I sat beside Valdris on our bed. His face was gray. His breathing was barely perceptible. The mate bond between us was a single flickering thread where once there had been a river of light. I pressed my forehead to his, closed my eyes, let my silver light pour into the bond like water finding a crack in a dam, and I went in. The inside of the mate bond was nothing like I expected. I had imagined light, warmth, the familiar hum that pulsed between Valdris and me when our hands touched or our eyes met across a crowded room. Instead, I found myself standing in darkness so complete it had texture. It pressed against my skin like wet cloth. It filled my lungs with every breath. It tasted of ash and iron and the slow decay of something that had once been magnificent. This was what the poison was doing to our bond, turning light into darkness, turning warmth into void, turning the connection between two souls into a corridor of rot. My silver light guttered in this place, the glow that had always come so easily, that had healed wounds and closed gashes and earned me the only value the Iron Pelt Pack had ever granted me, flickered like a candle in a gale. The darkness pressed against it from every side, hungry, deliberate, wanting to swallow the last of what made me STARBORN. I pushed forward. The corridor of the bond stretched before me, and I walked it on legs that trembled but did not stop. Beneath my bare feet, the ground was cold and slick. The walls on either side pulsed with a faint, sickly green luminescence that I recognized as the poison working its way through the bond's structure. It was methodical, patient, dissolving the threads of connection one by one with the precision of an architect dismantling a cathedral stone by stone. I had less than 24 hours, possibly less. Every minute I spent in this place was a minute the poison continued its work. Valdris. I called his name into the darkness. My voice came back to me warped and hollow, as if the darkness had chewed on it before returning it. Valdris, where are you? Nothing. Just the wet pulse of the poisoned walls and the distant sound of something breathing. Something large. Something that was not Valdris. I kept walking. The corridor branched, split into pathways that led deeper into what I slowly realized was not just a bond, but a mind. Valdris's mind. 3 centuries of memories stored in a labyrinth of stone and shadow and frost. The poison had not just attacked the bond. It had followed the connection into the king himself, burrowing into the architecture of his consciousness like roots splitting rock. I chose the path where the darkness was thickest, where the poison had concentrated its assault. Logic told me that if the corruption had a center, that was where I would find Valdris, and if I could reach him, if I could anchor my light to his presence, together we might burn the poison out. The first memory hit me without warning. One moment I was walking through darkness. The next I was standing in a field of winter wheat beneath a sky choked with smoke. The sounds of battle surrounded me, steel on steel. Screams. The wet, final sounds of bodies hitting frozen ground. I could smell blood so strongly it coated the back of my throat. And there was Valdris. Not the king I knew. A younger version. His face unlined, his hair fully black without the silver that centuries would thread through it. He was kneeling in the mud, holding someone. A woman. Her eyes were open, but seeing nothing. Dark hair spread across the trampled wheat like a stain. A wound in her chest that no healer could have closed. His first mate. The bond that had been severed by a blade 300 years ago. The grief pouring off him was so vast it nearly drove me to my knees. This was not a memory I was observing. I was inside it. Feeling it, drowning in the oceanic despair of a young wolf holding the other half of his soul while she grew cold in his arms, while the bond between them screamed and tore and finally, mercifully, went silent. And around the edges of this memory, the poison coiled, feeding on the grief, growing stronger from it, using 300 years of unhealed pain as fuel for its assault. I understood then what I was fighting. The poison was not merely chemical. It was designed to weaponize the host's own suffering against them, to find the deepest wounds, the oldest scars, the places where pain had calcified into permanent fixtures of the soul, and to use that pain as a doorway for destruction. Whoever had created this compound understood darkness intimately, and they had known somehow that the Alpha King carried 3 centuries of it. I moved through the memory like a ghost, past the young Valdris without touching him. This was the past. I could not change it, but I could follow the trail of poison deeper, to wherever Valdris's present consciousness had retreated. The next memory was older still. A boy of perhaps 10 standing before a burning hall. The same black hair, the same gray eyes, but small and frightened in a way the king I knew would never allow himself to be. Around him, the bodies of his family, his pack, destroyed in a raid that had come in the night. He was the only survivor. He stood among the ashes and did not cry, did not scream, just stood, small and rigid, learning the lesson that would define the next 300 years of his existence. That love was a vulnerability. That attachment was a door through which annihilation entered. That the only way to survive was to need no one. The poison loved this memory. It wrapped around it like a serpent around an egg, feeding, growing, sending tendrils deeper into the foundation of who Valdris was. I could see the strategy now. The corruption was not trying to kill him directly. It was trying to convince him, through the lens of his own history, that the bond was dangerous, that I was dangerous, that the safest choice was to let the connection dissolve and return to the solitude that had kept him alive for centuries. And somewhere in the deepest part of this labyrinth, Valdris was listening. I found him at the center, a vast chamber of black stone. No light except the faint glow of my own silver, barely alive, barely enough to illuminate the figure sitting on the cold floor, with his back against the wall. He looked as he did in the waking world, strong-featured, silver-streaked hair. But his eyes were closed, and the expression on his face was one of exhausted surrender. Around him, the poison had formed a cocoon of greenish-black tendrils, each one whispering in a voice that sounded like his own. Let go. The whisper was insidious, gentle, almost kind. You know what happens when you hold on. You know what it costs. You held her, and she died in your arms. You held your family, and they burned. Every time you reach for someone, the world takes them away. Let this bond break. Return to the cold. The cold never betrayed you. His hands lay open on his lap, palms up, the posture of a man who had stopped fighting. Not because he lacked strength, but because 300 years of carrying the weight alone had finally, in this dark place, in this poisoned silence, become too heavy. Valdris. My voice was thin in this space. The darkness swallowed it, chewed it, returned it as barely a whisper. But his eyes opened, storm gray, dulled by the poison, but still alive. Elowen. My name on his lips sounded like a question he was afraid to answer. You should not be here. If the bond breaks while you are inside it. I know. Then leave. His voice cracked. I am not worth dying for. I have lived long enough. Too long. Let the bond break. Save yourself. I walked toward him. Each step cost me something. The darkness pressed harder the closer I got. The poison recoiled from my light, but did not retreat. It pushed back, testing, probing, looking for cracks in my resolve. And it found them. Of course it did. I had 22 years of cracks. I felt the whispers change, redirecting from Valdris to me. Hollow one. The voice was different now, softer, younger. It sounded like the children who had thrown stones, like Thalric saying whole, like every voice that had ever told me I was less than. You are nothing. You have always been nothing. A trick of moonlight that will fade by morning. He does not truly want you. No one ever truly wanted you. You are empty, empty, empty. My silver light dimmed. For one terrible moment, I believed it. Believed every word. 22 years of conditioning does not evaporate in 3 weeks of happiness. The hollow space may have been filled by my wolf, by the bond, by Valdris, but the memory of emptiness was carved into my bones, and the poison knew exactly where to press. I stopped walking. My light flickered. The darkness surged closer. Then I heard another voice. Not the poison, not a whisper, a memory of my own, rising unbidden from somewhere the darkness could not reach. You are not empty, Elowen. You are just waiting for the right moment to be seen. Thalric's words, spoken 15 years ago by a river to a bleeding child. The cruelest irony. The man who had ultimately betrayed me had also given me the words that saved me. Because the words themselves had never been false. Only the man who spoke them had proven unworthy of them. I was not empty. I had never been empty. I was STARBORN. I was a healer. I was a wolf. I was a queen. And I was standing inside the consciousness of a man who had defended me before he knew me, who had knelt when he could have commanded, who had asked to earn my trust instead of demanding it. I was not going to let him die in the dark. My light blazed, not the gentle silver glow of healing, not the steady warmth of mending flesh and bone. This was something else entirely, something older, something that came from the place where my wolf lived, where the STARBORN blood ran hot and ancient through my veins. The light exploded outward from my body in a shock wave that slammed into the darkness like a fist of pure radiance. The poison screamed. I did not know a substance could scream, but this one did. A high, thin, agonized sound as my silver light burned through its tendrils like fire through cobwebs. The whispers dissolved. The greenish-black cocoon around Valdris cracked and split and fell away in pieces that turned to ash before they hit the ground. I reached him, dropped to my knees before him, took his face in my hands. His skin was cold, but his eyes were clearing, the storm gray returning to full intensity. I am here, I said. I am not leaving. I am not letting you go back to the cold. The bond. His voice was raw. The poison. I can still feel it. I know. I pressed my forehead to his. The same gesture he had used on the ridge that first night. The gesture that had become ours. A language of foreheads and breath and closeness that needed no translation. I need you to fight with me. Not for me. With me. Can you do that? His hands came up, covered mine where they held his face. I felt his wolf stir behind his eyes, felt the ancient, enormous power of the Alpha King gathering itself in the ruins of the darkness. Together, he said. We burned the poison out together. My silver light and his midnight blue power intertwined, spiraling through the corridors of his mind, searing through every pocket of corruption. The darkness fought back. It threw memories at us like weapons. His first mate dying, my humiliation in the sacred circle, his centuries of solitude, my years of being called hollow. Every wound, every scar, every moment of suffering we had each endured was hurled against us in a last, desperate assault. But the darkness had miscalculated. It had assumed our pain would divide us. Instead, our shared understanding of suffering became the bridge between our lights. I knew what it meant to be alone. He knew what it meant to lose everything. And together, standing in the wreckage of our separate histories, we were not weaker for our wounds. We were forged by them. The last of the poison burned away in a flash of silver and blue that shook the foundations of the bond itself. The darkness receded. Light flooded the corridors. Warmth returned like spring after the longest winter. I opened my eyes. I was back in our chambers. Daylight streamed through the windows. My hands were pressed to Valdris's chest, silver light still pulsing gently against his skin. The mate bond between us was no longer a flickering thread. It was a river, a torrent, brighter and stronger than it had been before the poison, as if the act of nearly losing it had tempered the connection into something unbreakable. Valdris opened his eyes, clear, alive, storm gray with gold flickering at the edges where his wolf pressed close to the surface. You came for me. His voice was hoarse but steady. Someone had to. You could have died, so could you. I did not remove my hands from his chest. Could not. The need to touch him, to confirm he was real and warm and alive, overrode everything else. You were going to let the bond break. You were going to let yourself die rather than risk me getting hurt. Old habits. His hand came up to cover mine. I have been choosing solitude over risk for 300 years. It is a difficult reflex to break. Then let me help you break it. My voice cracked, and I let it. Let him see the fear I had carried for 3 days. Let him feel it through the bond. You do not get to die on me, Valdris. Not after I spent 22 years waiting to feel whole. You do not get to leave me alone in this palace with a court that half suspects I poisoned you myself." Something shifted in his expression, something fierce and tender and entirely undone. He pulled me down to him and kissed me, and the desperation in it was different from anything we had shared before. This was not the careful, patient courtship of the past 3 weeks. This was the raw, shaking relief of two people who had stared into the abyss and refused to let it take what was theirs. I kissed him back with everything I had. Every fear, every fierce, furious refusal to lose one more thing. The mate bond sang between us so brightly that the healers outside the door later said the light had been visible through solid stone. In the days that followed, I did not rest. Valdris was recovering. The bond was restored, but the poison had come from somewhere, and the hand that had delivered it had been guided by a mind I knew all too well. I led the investigation myself, not Valdris, not the council, me. I used my STARBORN abilities in ways I had not known were possible until necessity demanded them. I could sense traces of dark intent the way I could sense infection in a wound. The residue of malice left a signature, a scent almost, that clung to objects and people who had been touched by it. I traced the poison from the goblet to the servant who had carried it, from the servant to the minor lord who had hired him, from the lord to the intermediary who had supplied the compound. Each link in the chain confirmed what the initial investigation had revealed. The poison's formula had originated in the Northern Territories. It had been passed through 5 sets of hands, each one designed to obscure the source. But the final set of hands, the ones that had mixed the compound and written the instructions for its use, belonged to someone who knew the old ways. Someone with access to knowledge that most modern wolves had forgotten. Someone who had arrived at the Iron Pelt Pack 3 weeks before my world had changed, carrying ancient bloodline knowledge and a smile that hid venom. Selene Bloodcrest. I presented the evidence to the full court on the 7th day after the poisoning. Valdris sat beside me on the throne, still pale but upright, his gaze burning with the cold fury of a winter that would never thaw. The council assembled. Representatives from visiting packs filled the gallery. I had requested witnesses. I wanted this done in the light, before eyes that could carry the truth back to every territory. "Bring her in," I said. Selene entered the great hall flanked by guards. She had been brought from the Iron Pelt territory under escort, separated from Thalric, who had not been charged but whose cooperation in surrendering her had been noted. She wore chains on her wrists, silver chains that suppressed her wolf, but her spine was straight, her violet eyes defiant, her chin raised at an angle that said she considered this entire proceeding beneath her. She looked at me on the throne, and something flickered across her face. Not fear. Not yet. Contempt. The same contempt she had shown me at the training grounds when she called my limitations admirable. The same contempt that had curved her lips when she whispered broken thing as she passed me in the sacred circle. She still saw the hollow one, still believed that the girl she had mocked was the same girl sitting before her now. She was wrong. I laid out the evidence with the precision I had learned from years of diagnosing ailments. Methodical. Thorough. Each piece building on the last until the chain of culpability was unbroken from her hands to the goblet that had nearly killed my mate. The formula traced to Northern Territory archives accessible only to high bloodline families. The intermediary confirmed under oath that his instructions came through Solen's personal courier. The compound itself contained a signature element unique to Bloodcrest herbalism, a technique passed through their line for generations. Solen listened with growing rigidity. The defiance in her eyes flickered, dimmed, reignited with desperate fury. "This is fabrication," she hissed. "The Hollow One cannot be trusted. She bewitched the king. She has bewitched this entire court. I am of noble blood. I am Bloodcrest. You cannot. I can." My voice cut through hers like a blade through silk. "I am your queen, and the evidence is not mine alone." It was gathered by the king's own investigators, confirmed by independent witnesses, and verified by council scholars who have no loyalty to me beyond the truth. I stood. The silver light rose beneath my skin, not threatening, not aggressive, but present, visible, a reminder of what I was. You poisoned the Alpha King. You attempted to destroy a true mate bond blessed by the Moon Goddess. You conspired to commit regicide from across territorial lines. Each charge landed in the silence of the hall like a stone dropped into still water. Solen's composure cracked. I watched it happen in real time. The mask of superiority fracturing along lines of fear that had been there all along, hidden beneath breeding and bloodline, and the conviction that power protected the powerful from consequence. "You are nothing," she spat. "You were nothing when I arrived at Iron Pelt, and you are nothing now." A hollow shell wearing a crown she did not earn. Thalric saw it. The pack saw it. Everyone saw it except this fool of a king who... That is enough. Valdris spoke for the first time. 2 words. Quiet. Absolute. The temperature in the hall dropped. Every wolf present felt the crush of his authority settle over them like a physical weight. Solen flinched as if she had been struck. "My mate has presented evidence of your guilt," Valdris continued. His voice was ice. His eyes were winter storms at their most merciless. "The evidence is conclusive. Do you deny it?" Solen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The silence stretched. In that silence, I watched the last of her defiance drain away like blood from a wound, replaced by the hollow realization that there was no escape, no political maneuver, no ancient bloodline to hide behind. Just a woman who had tried to murder a king and had been caught by the very person she had dismissed as worthless. I turned to the court. The sentence for attempted regicide under the laws of the 10 packs is death or exile at the Crown's discretion. I paused, letting the weight of that settle. But I am a healer. Death is not my nature. I looked at Solen directly, held her violet eyes with my golden ones. "Lady Solen Bloodcrest, you are stripped of your titles, your lands, and your bloodline status. You are marked as an oathbreaker and a traitor. You are exiled from all 10 territories. You will live as a lone wolf without pack, without name, without protection. For the rest of your life, every wolf who sees your mark will know what you are and what you did." The hall was absolutely silent. Solen stared at me. For the first time since I had known her, since that morning on the training grounds when she had circled me like prey and called my limitations admirable, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "You cannot do this to me." Her voice was small now, stripped of its venom. "I am Bloodcrest. I am..." "You are nothing." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Not cruel, not vengeful, simply true, delivered with the quiet certainty of a woman who had been called nothing her entire life and knew exactly how the word tasted. You defined worth by bloodline and power. By those standards, you have just lost everything. The guards took her. She screamed as they dragged her from the hall. Screamed my name. Screamed Thalric's name. Screamed curses that bounced off the stone walls and faded into echoes that grew smaller and smaller until there was only silence. I sat down. My hands were shaking. Valdris's hand found mine beneath the armrest of the throne and held it, steady and warm. 2 weeks later, Thalric came. He arrived at the palace requesting an audience, not as an alpha making demands, as a man carrying the weight of everything he had destroyed, asking to be heard. I received him in the throne room, Valdris beside me, his presence solid and reassuring, but deliberately restrained. This was my confrontation, my closure. He understood that without being told. Thalric looked diminished, not physically smaller, but reduced in some fundamental way. The confidence that had once radiated from him like heat from a forge had been replaced by something gray and exhausted. There were shadows beneath his amber eyes. His shoulders curved inward as if bracing against a wind that never stopped blowing. He knelt before the thrones, not because Valdris commanded it, because he chose to. Ilawan. My name in his mouth sounded different than it once had. Smaller. Inadequate. I have come to formally apologize for the sanctions placed upon the Iron Pelt Pack and to request leniency for my people. I studied him. This man I had loved for 5 years. This face I had memorized in moonlight. These amber eyes I had once believed would look at me with warmth for the rest of my life. I searched for the pain I expected to feel, the residual ache of betrayal, the ghost of heartbreak. I found nothing. Not anger, not hatred, not even the cold satisfaction of seeing him brought low. Just a vast, calm emptiness where Thalric had once lived inside me. He had been replaced so thoroughly by what I had found since that there was simply no room left for him. Stand up, Thalric. He rose, met my eyes for the first time, and I watched the full reality of what he had lost hit him like a physical force. I was not the girl he had rejected in the sacred circle. I was not the hollow healer in the white dress with moonflowers braided into her hair and desperation in her eyes. I was a queen, a STARBORN wolf, a woman who had saved the Alpha King from death by walking into darkness and refusing to let it win. I was everything he had once promised to love and had thrown away because he could not see past the absence of a wolf to the presence of everything else. You called me incomplete. My voice was quiet, steady, free of tremor or tears. You stood before 500 wolves and told them I was the mistake you almost made. You said a Luna must be whole, must be powerful, must stand as equal beside her alpha. Each word found its mark. I could see them landing in his expression, flinch by flinch. You were right about one thing. I stood from the throne and walked down the steps until I stood before him at eye level, close enough to see the amber of his irises, close enough to smell pine and iron, the scent that had once made my heart race and now stirred nothing at all. A Luna must be strong. I held his gaze. I am strong. I was always strong. You were just too weak to see it. He broke, not dramatically, not with sobs or wailing, just a quiet crumbling of the face, like a wall giving way to water that has been pressing against it for too long. Tears traced silent lines down his cheeks. Ilawan, I am sorry. I was wrong. I was a fool. I let the elders manipulate me. I let fear make my choices. I should have kept my promise. I should have chosen you. I should have. You should have. I interrupted gently. There was no cruelty in my voice, no satisfaction, just truth. But you did not. And now we both live with that choice. I looked at him for one more moment, memorized the face of the lesson that had cost me everything and given me more than I had ever dreamed possible in return. Reduce the sanctions on the iron pelt pack. I said it to Valdris without turning from Thalric, not because their alpha deserves mercy, but because the pack should not suffer for their leader's failures. Thalric's eyes widened. Gratitude and shame warred across his features. Thank you. His voice broke on the words. I am not doing it for you. I held his gaze one final moment. I am doing it because it is right. And because I am happy now. Truly happy. Holding on to anger would only poison what I have built. I turned away from him, walked back up the steps to my throne, to Valdris, whose hand found mine the moment I sat down, whose eyes held nothing but pride and a love so fierce it burned through the bond. Thalric left the palace that afternoon. I watched from the window of our chambers as he walked through the gates alone. He did not look back. I was glad. There was nothing left to see. In the weeks that followed, my STARBORN abilities deepened in ways that astonished even Valdris. I could heal wounds of the mind as well as the body. Warriors who had returned from border skirmishes with nightmares that made them scream in their sleep came to me, and I laid my silver hands on their temples and drew the poison of trauma from their minds the way I had drawn the poison from the mate bond. Children who had been orphaned by pack conflicts, their small hearts hardened by grief too large for their years, sat in my lap while I hummed and let the warm light sink into them until the rigid terror in their eyes softened into something that remembered how to trust. The people called me the Silver Queen. They came from across the territories seeking healing I had not known I could provide. And I turned no one away. Not the lowborn, not the scarred, not the broken, especially not the broken. Valdris found me one evening in the healing rooms, my hands still glowing faintly as the last patient of the day left with tears of gratitude on her face. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me with an expression I had come to know well. Pride layered with something quieter, something that looked like reverence. The council is talking about you, he said. I looked up, bracing for criticism. What are they saying? That you have done more to earn loyalty in 2 months than most rulers achieve in a decade. He crossed the room and took my glowing hands in his, turning them over, studying the silver light that still pulsed beneath my skin. They are not wrong. You are changing how this kingdom understands power. Not through force, through compassion, through showing up for people no one else bothers to see. I learned that from being unseen myself. He pressed his lips to my knuckles. And that is exactly why no one will ever forget you. I had not thought of it in those terms. But he was right. Every person I healed, every child I comforted, every warrior I freed from the prison of their own trauma was a small revolution, a quiet insistence that strength was not measured by claws and teeth and bloodline, that the most powerful thing in any kingdom was the willingness to kneel beside someone in pain and say, I see you. You matter. Let me help. The coronation came on a day of brilliant sunshine. The great hall was filled beyond capacity. Wolves from all 10 territories gathered to witness what many of them still struggled to believe. A wolfless healer from the iron pelt pack, the hollow one, the broken thing, the empty shell, crowned queen of all the territories. Elder Haldrick performed the ceremony. The same man who had officiated the claiming ceremony where Thalric had rejected me. The same voice that had called alphas forward to claim their mates now placed a crown of silver and moonstone on my head and declared me queen of the 10 packs. The wolves who had once mocked me knelt. The elders who had whispered hollow one bowed their heads. The warriors who had laughed in the sacred circle pressed their fists to their hearts in salute. And Valdris stood beside me. Not above me, not in front of me, beside me, equals, partners, mates. I looked out over the hall and felt my wolf rise to the surface, content and powerful, and finally, irrevocably home. I had spent 22 years believing the hollow space inside me was a curse, a deficiency, proof that I was less than everyone around me. I had been wrong. The hollow space had been a cradle, and what it had been nurturing in darkness for 22 years was not emptiness. It was this, all of this, a wolf, a bond, a king, a crown, a kingdom full of people who needed exactly what I had always been, a healer. 3 months after the coronation, I knelt in the palace gardens with my hands glowing silver and a child's life balanced on the warmth between my palms. The girl was 6 years old, small for her age, dark hair matted with fever sweat. Her mother had carried her through the palace gates at dawn, past guards who no longer questioned whether common wolves deserved access to their queen. The child had been burning for 4 days. The local healers had tried everything in their knowledge and failed. The fever had taken root somewhere deeper than herbs and compresses could reach, somewhere in the marrow of the girl's developing wolf, tangled in the delicate architecture of a shifter body still learning how to hold its power. The palace healers had examined her and shaken their heads. There is nothing more we can do. The fever has bonded to her wolf. If we try to separate them, we risk destroying both. I had heard those words before. Not about this child, but about 100 others. About wounds too deep, damage too old, poisons too entrenched. There is nothing we can do. The phrase that had followed me through 22 years of proving it wrong. I laid my hands on the girl's chest. Her heartbeat fluttered against my palms like a trapped bird. The silver light sank into her, gentle, patient, finding its way through the labyrinth of her small body with the same instinct that had guided me through the darkness of Valdris's consciousness. I could feel the fever wrapped around her dormant wolf, like a vine strangling a sapling, tight, persistent, slowly suffocating something that had not yet had the chance to bloom. I did not fight the fever. I had learned in these 3 months of healing an entire kingdom, one body at a time, that the most powerful medicine was not force. It was understanding. I reached for the fever the way I would reach for a frightened animal, slowly, without aggression, acknowledging its presence without granting it permission to stay. The fever resisted. Then it softened. Then it released. Color flooded back into the girl's cheeks like dawn returning to a valley after a long night. Her eyes opened, brown and bright and confused and alive. Her mother made a sound I had heard 100 times and would never grow accustomed to. The sound of a parent receiving back a child they had already begun to mourn. She gathered her daughter against her chest and wept with the kind of abandon that only comes when hope has been returned from the dead. "Thank you, my queen." The woman's voice was shattered and rebuilt in the same breath. The other healers said there was nothing they could do. There is always something that can be done. I helped the child sit up, adjusting her blanket around her thin shoulders. She will need rest and plenty of water. Keep her warm for the next 3 days. The fever will not return." After they left, I sat alone on the stone bench beneath the flowering aldera tree that had become my favorite place in the palace. Its white blossoms smelled of moonflower and honey, and in the afternoons, the sunlight filtered through its branches in patterns that reminded me of the silver light beneath my skin. This was where I came to think, to breathe, to remember who I was beneath the crown and the title and the responsibilities that grew larger with every passing week. I looked out over the city, my city now. White stone buildings catching the afternoon light, gardens blooming between structures and explosions of color that I was still learning the names of. The mountains beyond, snow-capped and ancient, standing guard over a kingdom that had existed for centuries and was now, improbably, mine to protect. 3 months. In 3 months, I had healed more people than I had in 22 years at the Iron Pelt Pack. Not because my power had grown, though it had, but because for the first time in my life, no one was telling me to stay in my chamber and wait to be needed. No one was measuring my worth by the absence of a wolf. No one was whispering "Hollow One" when I walked past. Here, I was not tolerated. I was wanted. The court had not been easy. Some council members had resisted my elevation with the polite stubbornness of people who believed tradition was more important than truth. A few had tried subtle schemes to undermine my authority, questioning my decisions in sessions, failing to relay important information, small acts of sabotage designed to make me appear incompetent. Valdris had dealt with them swiftly and without mercy, but I had dealt with them too, in my own way, with patience, with consistency, with the quiet, relentless demonstration that a queen who could heal a dying child and face down a poisoner and walk into the darkness of a mate, bond to drag her king back from death, was not a queen who could be diminished by whispered politics. One by one, they had come around, or they had left. Either way, the court that remained was one I trusted, one that trusted me. And I had found allies I had not expected, warriors who respected strength earned through survival rather than granted by birth, healers who came to study my techniques with the hunger of people discovering that everything they thought they knew was only the beginning, common people who saw in me a reflection of their own overlooked lives and drew hope from the fact that someone who understood invisibility now sat on the throne. "There you are." Valdris's voice came from behind me, warm and deep, and carrying the faint amusement that meant he had been looking for me and had known exactly where I would be. "I should have known you would be healing someone instead of attending the council meeting." I turned and my heart did the thing it always did when I saw him. The small stutter, the skip, the rush of warmth through the mate bond that had not dimmed in 3 months, but had grown steadily brighter, like embers being fed by an endless supply of air. He walked toward me through the dappled sunlight, and I thought that I would never grow accustomed to the sight of him, the sharp features, the silver-threaded hair, the storm-gray eyes that had looked upon 3 centuries of loneliness, and somehow still knew how to soften when they found me. The council can manage without me for one afternoon. This child needed help. He sat beside me on the bench, close enough that our shoulders touched. His arm came around me with the easy possessiveness of a man who had learned that holding someone did not have to mean losing them. "You are going to heal the entire kingdom, one person at a time. Are you not? If that is what it takes." He kissed my temple, lingered there, his lips warm against my skin. "This is why you are perfect for this. You genuinely care, not as strategy, not as performance. You care because it is who you are. I leaned into him, letting the solid warmth of his body anchor me the way it always did. Someone has to care. Someone has to see the ones who get overlooked. I spent 22 years being invisible. I will not let anyone in this kingdom feel the way I felt. He was quiet for a moment, the kind of silence that meant he was weighing whether to share something. I had learned to read his silences the way I read wounds. Each one had a different texture, a different depth. "There is news from the Northern Scouts," he said finally. His voice was careful. "A message arrived this morning." I straightened, looked at him. "What kind of message?" "They found traces of another STARBORN bloodline." His storm gray eyes met mine with an expression I recognized as the same wonder he had shown me in the sacred circle 3 months ago. A young male in the Frost Brand pack, 14 years old, showing signs of dormant power, healing abilities that his pack healers cannot explain. Light in his hands that has no source. My breath stopped. Another STARBORN. I had read the ancient texts in the library, had traced the histories of my bloodline through centuries of records and legends. The STARBORN had always been rare. Even at their peak, there were never more than a handful in any generation. When they disappeared 5 centuries ago, the world assumed they were gone forever. But I had woken up. And if the old texts were right, if the prophecy about light and shadow being tethered held any truth, then my awakening might have sent a signal through whatever ancient current connected STARBORN blood across distances and generations. A signal that said, "It is time. Wake up." Does his pack know what he is? They know he is different. Valdris chose his next words carefully. They call him broken, defective, a wolf who cannot shift and has no place in their hierarchy. He is being treated the way you were treated. The words hit me with a force that had nothing to do with surprise and everything to do with recognition. I closed my eyes and saw the river, the stones, the blood on my back, the raw throat and the empty eyes, and the 7-year-old girl who believed she was nothing because every voice she had ever heard told her so. "We have to find him. I know." Valdris took my hand. "We will travel north next week, together. You can help guide him through his awakening, if it comes. And if it does not come yet, you can at least show him that what he is not a curse." The thought of it filled me with a purpose so fierce it burned. Not the purpose of healing wounds or ruling a kingdom or navigating court politics. Something deeper. Something that felt like the reason my wolf had slept for 22 years and chosen this moment, this life, this version of me to finally emerge. I could find them. The other sleepers. The other hollow ones. The children pressing their palms to empty chests and begging the gods to make them whole. I could find them and sit beside them the way Thalric had once sat beside me by the river. Except I would not make promises I could not keep. I would not offer words I would later betray. I would show them what I was, what they could become, and I would stay. Together, I said, we go together. We traveled north the following week. 3 days of riding through mountain passes and ancient forests. Valdris beside me the entire way. Our wolves running side by side when the terrain allowed. His midnight black fur brushing against my silver white in the gesture of closeness that had become as natural as breathing. We found the boy at the edge of a river. He was small for 14. Thin, dark hair falling into eyes that were too old for his face, bruises on his arms in the shapes of fingers. He sat on the riverbank with his knees drawn to his chest, staring at the water with the blank expression of someone who had stopped expecting anything good from the world. I knew that expression. I had worn it for 15 years. I approached alone. Valdris understood without being told that this moment was not for kings and authority and displays of power. This moment was for a woman who had been exactly where this boy was, who had sat beside exactly this kind of water, who had believed exactly the same lie he was believing right now. I sat beside him on the bank, did not speak, did not touch him, simply existed beside him in silence, solid and present, the way someone had once done for me. After a long time, the boy spoke without looking at me. They say I am broken, that I have no wolf, that I should have been left in the woods. The words were so familiar, they made my chest ache. I know, I said quietly. They said the same things to me, for 22 years. He looked at me then, really looked, saw the silver light that pulsed faintly beneath my skin, saw the wolf behind my golden eyes, saw the crown that a woman who had once been called hollow now wore without apology. You? His voice cracked with disbelief. Me. I met his eyes and held them with all the gentleness I had spent my life cultivating and all the strength I had spent 3 months discovering. I spent 22 years believing I was empty, that the space inside me where a wolf should have been was proof that I was less than everyone around me. What happened? I found out the truth. I smiled at him, and the smile carried the weight of everything I had survived to earn it. I was never empty. I was never broken. And neither are you. You are not hollow. You have never been hollow. You are just sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up. His eyes filled with tears he was too proud and too wounded to let fall. How do you know? Because I am STARBORN. And so are you. The tears fell. He did not wipe them away. I did not tell him to stop. I simply sat beside him on the riverbank while the water flowed past and the sun moved across the sky, and a 14-year-old boy who had believed he was nothing began slowly to consider the possibility that he might be something extraordinary. That night, as I sat by the fire in the northern lodge reviewing STARBORN texts, a thought crossed my mind, unbidden. I wondered where Solène was at this moment. The reports had reached us weeks ago. She had been spotted in the borderlands between territories, moving through forests that belonged to Nopak, thin, filthy, her copper hair matted and dull. The Oathbreaker's mark on her wrist ensured that every wolf who crossed her path turned away. No shelter, no fire shared, no words spoken. She had become what she once called me. Nothing. A ghost moving through a world that refused to see her. I did not feel satisfaction. I did not feel pity either. I felt the quiet, settled weight of consequence. She had chosen cruelty, and cruelty had chosen her back. I thought of Thalric, too. Brenna had written to me last month. A brief letter carried by courier. She described the Iron Pelt Pack under reduced sanctions, slowly rebuilding. And she described Thalric. He sleeps poorly, she wrote. He keeps your old healing chamber exactly as you left it. The herbs are drying out. The moonflower petals have turned to dust. He goes in there sometimes and just stands. I do not think he is looking for anything. I think he is remembering what he threw away. I folded Brenna's letter and placed it in the fire, watched the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. The past belonged to the flames. I had a future to tend to. That evening, I stood on the balcony of the lodge where we were staying, looking out over the northern mountains. Valdris came up behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist, his chin resting on the top of my head. The mate bond hummed between us with the deep, steady warmth of a fire that would never go out. "What are you thinking?" His voice rumbled against my back. I leaned into him, closed my eyes, let the warmth of his body and the strength of his arms and the certainty of the bond remind me that this was real. All of it. Every impossible, miraculous, hard-won piece of it. I am thinking that the hollow space inside me was never empty. It was never a curse. It was never proof that I was broken. I opened my eyes and looked at the mountains and the stars and the vast, beautiful world that had tried to convince me I did not deserve to take up space in it. It was room. Room for my wolf. Room for you. Room for all of this. He tightened his arms around me, pressed his lips to my hair. "And room for them," I added softly, thinking of the boy by the river, of the others out there, still sleeping, still waiting, still pressing their palms to empty chests and wondering why the world seemed designed for everyone but them. Room to find them. Room to show them what they are. The moon rose over the mountains, full and luminous. Silver light that had once been my only comfort now felt like a greeting from an old friend. Somewhere below, in a room with a fire and a warm bed and the first full meal he had eaten in weeks, a 14-year-old boy was falling asleep with the knowledge that he was not alone, that someone had come for him, that the emptiness he carried was not a grave, but a garden waiting for the right season to bloom. "Shall we run?" Valdris murmured against my hair. I called my wolf. She came with joy, with power, with the fierce and luminous certainty of a creature who had waited 22 years for the freedom to exist and intended to savor every second of it. The transformation flowed through me like music, like water, like the most natural thing in the world. 2 wolves stood on the balcony in the moonlight, one silver white, glowing with STARBORN radiance, one midnight black, ancient and vast as the sky between stars. We leaped from the ledge and ran, into the forest, into the mountains, into the night that stretched before us, full of stars and darkness, and the promise of more sleepers waiting to be found. More hollow ones waiting to learn they had never been hollow at all. More broken things waiting to discover they were not broken, but dormant, not empty, but patient, not cursed, but chosen. They had expected me to shatter. Instead, I became a queen. Not because someone placed a crown on my head, but because I learned my true worth. Because I found a mate who saw me completely. Because I transformed pain into power and emerged from the darkness stronger than anyone imagined possible. The moon watched us run. 2 wolves. Silver and black. STARBORN and king. Mates. Partners. Equals. And the night was only beginning.